Welcome to this week's episode of Beyond the Reformer. I'm your host, Nick Lenny. I honestly cannot believe how much this community continues to grow every week. It is blowing my mind. We're now listened to in 85 countries and counting. And every week, I'm blown away by all the messages that you're sending me, the shares, the DMs. It's been so amazing to hear how these conversations on the podcast are sparking some reflection, connection, and curiosity across the world of Pilates. You know, I felt really passionate about creating content that wasn't just one school of thought. I feel really lucky because I just wasn't educated like that in my Pilates training. So this has never been an idea that's been present with me. But I've actually had so many messages in the last couple of weeks explaining how you've loved hearing thoughts and stories from different schools of thought and how actually many of them have inspired you more than you thought that they would. I think this is just so great to hear. And aren't we really all just trying to use movement to ultimately help people feel better? And I think the more open we can be to different ways of thinking and exploring and questioning our whys, then the more that we can shape ourselves as teachers who promote change in people's lives. The literal hundreds of messages I've had this week has got me thinking about taking this community offline in some way. Maybe even an in-person event with a podcast live, but also some inspiring trainings with some of the amazing guests that we've had on the podcast so far. So keep your eyes peeled because something exciting might just be coming soon because I'm an absolute bugger for filling my diary with things to do. But I'd love to hear from you if you'd be keen for an event like this. So many of you have already messaged me and said that you would love to do more in-person events. Anyway, on to this week's episode. And I'm joined by someone that I have admired for such a long time, Christi Idavoy. She's a senior Polestar Pilates educator whose work bridges movement, mindfulness, and presence in such a beautiful way. Christi's background is really diverse and spans yoga, somatics, and Pilates education, and she has a real gift for helping teachers understand the power of presence, how to see what's really going on in the room, how to communicate clearly, and how to teach from a place of compassion and curiosity. In today's conversation, we explore how her journey across different cultures has shaped her approach to teaching, the art of presence when teaching so we can really show up for our clients, the power of our words and our cueing, and how as teachers we can reconnect to our why when burnout or overwhelm sets in. I know many of us have been there. This is a rich, inspiring, and practical chat that I know you're going to take so much from. So let's dive in. Christi, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I am so excited to chat to you because I'm a Polestar graduate and I have followed you online for years and years and years. I've done your classes. I love the way that you teach. And I'm so excited today to explore some of your story, but also just some of your thoughts around how we as teachers can show up for our clients and can kind of be present. Now, when this goes out, this will have already happened, but I know this weekend you're doing a movement as medicine course. And I love the idea of that. I love the idea that movement is just so much more than exercise. It's something that I'm really passionate about as well. I'd love to understand a little bit more about what was the idea behind that and the inspiration for that, Christi.
Movement is medicine. I mean, movement has been my medicine personally, as long as I can remember. Even as a young, very young child, I would watch TV and roll over, and my grandmother would be yelling from the kitchen, you're going to break your neck. From a very young age, I always felt like I knew what I was doing. I was very safe in my body. And it's my respite, my altar, my church. So my body and movement practices have been very much my savior in different moments of life. And so sharing that with others, right, which has been my journey so far, sharing this medicine of movement has really been an inspiration. And and I observe and I watch, and I'm constantly blown away of how transformational movement is. And I learned so much from watching other people's experience. And so I don't really remember when I started using that hashtag, I think it was. I started writing it somewhere over the years in this, which still feels new, world of social media. I started using it. People started approaching me about it, and I on Pilates Anytime, I've got a whole series and sequence of classes that we called Movement is Medicine. And so when Polestar approached me about doing one of these pro workshops, so it's a 3-hour online workshop, we decided to just go with that as a title. It is very broad because there's so many angles of it, but at the core, it's all about how presence through movement really heals.
I love that. We'll go deeper into that in a moment. I'd love to understand, you touched a little bit about movement has always been into your life, but where did, from rolling over on your kitchen floor, where did it then turn into Pilates? Was it Pilates first? Was it yoga first? I'd love to understand the kind of background that got you to where you are today.
I guess it was first dance as most, I don't know about most, in my culture, most little girls get taken to ballet. So it definitely started through dance. And then throughout school and high school, I was a cheerleader. I was always very much into anything that had to do with movement and rhythm and the beat of a drum. And then it became yoga. And then because, dance can be quite harsh on your body, I was very competitive with myself as a dancer. I was also very much into academics, like, I'm a total nerd. I was in university till I was about 30 years old. Yoga became my dance. Yoga was a space that allowed me to be both academic and intellectual and also physical, and then finding that dance and that play between all of our aspects as a human being. So my academic background was first in philosophy. So my undergraduate degree is in philosophy and political science, but it was very, very much in philosophy. And so, the metaphysical aspect. My grandmother was very metaphysical and very esoteric. So yoga just was like this amazing gift because I knew about yoga philosophy before I knew that there was a physical practice that went along with it because of my grandmother. So when I found the physical, when I got invited to my first yoga class one day on the beach in Miami, I just knew halfway through the class, I was like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Like this is it. And then I moved to Costa Rica when I was 21 years old, and I started my first graduate degree. And I was working as a dancer and a choreographer and a yoga instructor. And I was invited to choreograph a piece for a musical theater group, and they happened to rehearse in a Pilates studio. And I'd heard about Pilates. I didn't even know that Pilates was a person. I just thought, "Oh yeah, Pilates is core training. I'm a yogi, I'm a dancer, I'm good." I was studying to be a diplomat, so I wasn't really looking to take any more teacher trainings or looking for movement modalities. I thought I was gonna end up being in the arena of politics and diplomacy. So the owner of that studio needed an instructor because her teachers were about to move back to California. They were from the States. So she basically made me an offer I couldn't refuse because she offered to pay for my teacher training in exchange for a year of work at the studio. And so, being the nerd that I am, was like, "Well, how am I gonna turn down more education?" And I happened to really enjoy the people. Brady Wedman was my first Pilates teacher. I happened to really enjoy being in his company. He was also very philosophical and had a very broad look on life, and so I said yes.
I love that. I love when, you sort of look back and you think, I was so guided on this path, like these things that just kind of happened. Where did it go from then? You did your training. What happened next?
Honestly, I did it was like 750 hours. It was massive, but we did it in a very condensed way. So we did it in about like 3 months. It felt extremely condensed. All this new stuff. I was very, being a yoga teacher and a yogi that was educated in a very traditional way, like we weren't even allowed to use yoga mats. I mean, I wasn't because I one day I forgot my yoga mat, and so my teacher saw my attachment to my mat because I said, "Oh, I can't go practice because I left my mat in Brooklyn." And he was like, "No more yoga mat for you." So there were no props, there was no incense, there was no music. It was very traditional in that sense, very masculine. So I get to Pilates and it's just like, why do we need all this stuff? And, being very aware of the environment, I could just imagine landfills full of used Pilates equipment and springs and the whole impact ecologically and the consumerism. And, I was very young and still very much in my head. And so it didn't really make sense, to be honest. At first. And so we were given all this repertoire. There was no manual. This is before YouTube and Google. Like, you would use the internet at an internet cafe to send some emails once a week, once a month, right? And so when my teachers left, I was just kind of left there with all this apparatus, and I was very curious. And so I would start to explore because I couldn't figure out why we needed the spring. Why do we need all this? Like, what's the point? Clearly it's powerful. I had enough humility to have respect for it. And it wasn't until I read Joseph Pilates' books that I realized the energy behind the modality that really made me really commit to it. And so obviously reading Joseph Pilates books was also a little churning in the stomach because it's so rough around the edges. But again, given my academic background, I knew not to judge, World War II, Germany, what he came out of, his reality, his world, getting past all of that and feeling the affinity with Joseph Pilates' message and philosophy of like every single individual needs to take responsibility for their life, for their health, for their trauma, for their thoughts, for their beliefs. So that really resonated with me as someone that wanted to get into the world of politics and to really affecting change. And I knew already I had had enough experience with yoga and fitness. I knew the power of exercise. So I really started to see Pilates as, and I don't want to offend anyone. I know some people can find this very offensive, but it's my own personal experience. Pilates became like another branch on the Ashtanga tree, was like another way to be in union. Because yoga means to yoke together, to bring together. And it's translated as union of mind, body, and spirit, right? And so that yoking together, and then contrology happens to have the same definition. And so it was very much an environment where you don't have to, there's nothing spiritual about it. It's very Western. Of course, for me, it's deeply spiritual. But when you meet the other and you meet the market and you meet different religious beliefs, I mean, I had to disguise yoga. I used to call it meditative aerobics. I was like, we're not going to do yoga. Let's just bring our awareness to our breath. Pilates was like, wow, it's reach so many individuals with this different modality. And so, to answer the question, after being in that space for about 2 years, I moved back to New York, where I'd been living previously. I was born in New Jersey. My mom is from Manhattan. I have family in Brooklyn. So I moved back to Brooklyn and I started teaching Pilates, and I had to get whipped into classical shape in order to get work. And my education, my original teacher training was very classical in nature. Like, we learned all of the Romana choreographies, and it was so much fun. And not very many people could do them, right? Could do those choreographies. So that was definitely a clash getting to New York City and having to really being forced to teach it in this one way to everyone. And I actually got let go of a job because I changed the order of the exercises one time.
But I think this is such a challenge, isn't it? That teaching real people is a challenge I think that all teachers come up against. I think sometimes our trainings, depending on what trainings we've done more so than others, but can be a little sterile of teaching real people and understanding that even the real people on your course are usually in pretty good shape by that point to become a Pilates teacher if you're working with them. But what happened? So you're there, and then where do you go from there to end up? I guess it was in Miami that you ended up with Polestar. Is that right? Is that where the link happened with them? How did you discover Polestar, and did that start to open your eyes a bit wider to what was possible?
Well, my eyes were opened in New York City because I also studied a lot of Feldenkrais, and the neighborhood, Chelsea in Manhattan, that neighborhood is very mind body centered. And so there were other Pilates schools there that were very creative and contemporary, gyrotonic, that were blending concepts and meeting people where they were. So I was going to practice in those areas. But I was working in a different neighborhood that was more classical. And so I also, my heritage is Cuban and Puerto Rican. And so I grew up, which is very typical to have grown up between New Jersey and New York and Miami. So I was on a trip visiting family in Miami. And I decided I was done with New York and I was going to stay in Miami. And so I started looking for work there. I was doing a lot of one-on-one sessions, visiting people's homes, which I had done here in Costa Rica. I had like a minivan full of TheraBands and balls and yoga blocks and toys. And so I started doing that in Miami, and I had the blessing of meeting a 15-year-old. She was almost an Olympic runner. She wanted to be an Olympic runner, and she had bursitis in her hip. And so had a lot of chronic pain. A colleague of mine recommended that they work with me. And so I started going to their home and working with the adolescent, right? With this 15-year-old, with this teenager. She started noticing changes, having less pain, having better endurance. And so her mom asked me what I thought about Pilates. And I said, well, it depends, right? Like everything. So she said, "Well, I'd like for you to meet my daughter's Pilates instructor to see your opinion, to see what you think about what he's doing with her." So she invites me to go to the Pilates studio and shadow, just kind of be a fly on the wall during the Pilates session. And the Pilates teacher was Brent.
Another guiding you on a path moment, I guess.
Oh yeah, this whole I mean, I Joseph Pilates comes to me in dreams. I feel very, very connected. I different moments in my life I've tried to pull away from Pilates. It's very clear that it's part of my purpose in life is to share this work. And I prayed a lot for a community because I'm fascinated with the rehab and prehab and pain and all of the really challenging clients and situations. And so I didn't want to go back to school for physical therapy because it's going to sound weird, but it's not my passion. I'm very intuitive. And at this point, I feel comfortable enough in myself to even say that I channel when I teach. There is something that kind of comes over and starts to move through. And I prayed so much for a community that was doing what Polestar does in the world. And I would have this dream and vision of like boots on the ground, like soldiers, like thousands of Pilates instructors once I realized the magic of the spring, the transformational power, how accessible it is to such a wide variety of people. I prayed to find Brent and Polestar. So, when I walk into the flagship, right, Polestar studio in Miami it was 2009. It was actually this month, November of 2009. I just knew instantly when I walked in that I had felt like an instant reverence for the space and like, I'm not going to tell him what to do. Like this is serious. I don't really know where I am, but this feels really serious. And so I just shared with Brent what I had been doing with the teenager, with the 15-year-old. And he just smiled at me and he says, "We call those positive movement experiences at Polestar. Do you want to work here?" So it was like within 5 minutes, he offered me a job. And we always joke because I was working at a really gorgeous place in Miami Beach. He got me fired. They kind of sent me off. They could see, like, this is a huge career move for you to go down to Polestar. It was south of Miami Beach. So it was like literally, I was driving down to Polestar every day for at least an hour and a half. And I did that for about 10 years. So it was just a very quick soulmate kind of connection where we found each other. And then I shared, I really wanted to be a diplomat. And then he said, well, you can be a diplomat for Polestar. And I still didn't know enough about Polestar to understand what that meant.
What do you think it means now?
Well, I get to travel around the world and spread the magic and the philosophy, and very respectfully, it's like the gospel of Polestar, right? It's these universal ideas. It's a philosophy. It's a deep philosophy because, as you know, Nick, we are not choreography or exercise based. We're concept based, right? We're principle based. And those principles are a philosophical outlook on movement. And as I always remind the students, no one invented this. Like, Brent did not invent biomechanics or anatomy. These are universal laws that we arrive at through observation. And that's why they align with all the other movement modalities that exist. So it can be very complex, but it can also be very, very simple. Having the opportunity to travel and to be part of that vision I had of thousands, hopefully millions in the near future, of graduates. And they don't have to be Polestar because there's other schools that are aligned. But obviously, I can speak for Polestar. It's where I hung my hat. It's very much about restoring hope. Full stop.
It's so funny, Christy, because in the last couple of weeks, the podcast has gone mad. Okay. And I have been getting like so many DMs, and so many of them have said the same thing. That is, they have loved having, it's lovely that they've loved having the great content, great, but they've loved having conversations from so many schools of thoughts. And, it might be Pilates schools, but schools of thoughts. And I was reflecting on this week and thinking, and you just said it, I was never brought up in Polestar to believe in a specific lineage or belief, or it must be this way. And I feel really grateful for that. I was definitely brought up to be to question the why, to understand what is the purpose of this movement, what is the power of it, but fundamentally to teach belief and positivity to somebody first. And we'll touch upon that because I know you are so powerful in how you teach that. But so many people have messaged me to say, that it has blown their mind to hear people from other schools that they were taught to poo poo in their training. And I'm like, no, like all of this stuff is valid. I've learned so much from all the people I've talked to just in the conversations I've had so far. So it's really interesting hearing you say that, from a philosophical perspective, that is actually at the core of it. Like, this is just movement. This is just helping people, like, as you said, have hope. I always think I don't really mind how people get to that. Like, it doesn't matter what you do in my studio as long as you walk out and feel awesome. That's always my intention. I just want you to walk out and feel so great about yourself. So it's lovely to hear that. And I really love hearing as well. I always think when you come up against something that you don't feel comfortable with. I don't They put you on your edge a little bit. There's always something in that, isn't there? And you mentioned that a few times in your journey where you're like, I don't think I like this. And I definitely know this myself. Often the things I've now recognized, things that I almost have an instant sort of dislike to, I'm like, oh, I need to sit with this a bit more because I think, this is not the same as pushing through something that isn't right for you. There's a difference. But it's interesting hearing your story where you said like you've fallen out of love a little bit with Pilates at times. You've questioned it at times. What, apart from the dreams of Joseph Pilates, like what is it that brings you back to this modality? And do you feel like, and I think you do, your background and the other sort of influences you've had, I guess, are shaping the, in inverted commas, modality of Pilates?
Sure. I love what you said. Just to echo that, letting go of dogma letting go of this idea that there's only one way or that there's a right way, and understanding that every individual has their own right way. And really, we should focus on what that is for us personally and allow everyone else to do the same. It's funny when you ask me that question, the first thing that comes to mind is like the clothes chain. I really, really appreciate the ability to glide, like the reformer. And I love the name of this podcast, Beyond the Reformer. I love the environment that it creates for us to be able to have guided freedom of movement, to feel fluid, to feel the ease, to that we get to move towards the ease. My body has brought me back at different times. Definitely dreams. It's very funny, but I mean, I've been guided to live where I live. I listen to my dreams a lot. I get a lot of guidance in my dreams. Part of me also just doesn't even know. Like I don't even know why I keep. I feel like it's so much bigger than me. It's a stewardship. Brent has been using this word for the last few years, and it really resonates. But it's like being in service, being in deep service to humanity, and so in that, my own humanity. And as you said, when we get triggered by something, "Oh, I don't really like that person," or, I don't really wanna," it doesn't mean that I'm gonna force myself to like someone, but it's definitely an invitation to pause and say, "What is it in me that is active, that is not integrated, that I'm not comfortable with, that is creating this experience?" And so that we can really move towards being a conduit of energy, and on the most visceral, like physiological level, I feel that the Pilates environment really allows us to move and glide and create more ease through our physical joints, conduits. And then, so as we know, as we start working on the physical aspect, the more subtle psychological, emotional, spiritual aspects are also being worked on, because the reality is that we can't separate mind, body, and spirit. That's a euphemism, right? What is universal and eternal is unity, is that everything is happening now, right? I can't leave my spirit sleeping in and just bring my body and my mind here onto the podcast.
It's so true, Christy. And when I'm working with students, I have a course and I have like an energy module as part of it. And it's my favorite one to teach because, and I know Polestar has an energy module as well, because we are a business of energy, whether people know it or not. Like, you are bringing your energy, clients are bringing their energy. And yet, that's why I was so excited to have you on the podcast, because I knew we'd talk about this. A lot of teachers, I don't think, understand this. They haven't maybe been taught it or had experiences themselves to maybe understand the energetic work that is going on, whether they know it or not. And I've heard you talk about the power of presence. And actually, Diane from Polestar also talked about the power of presence, in that, it's really important to be present when you're teaching. What does that mean, Christy? And how can teachers understand or practice doing that more, doing it better?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you first started bringing this up, is they may have not had the experience themselves. So the first thing is the self. As Socrates said, there are no selfless acts. Like, I cannot remove this idea of selflessness. Nah, we'd have to unpack that, right? Christy, cannot do anything without myself being involved. So the first thing is, if you're a teacher, asking yourself, why are you a teacher? And really being honest with yourself. Is this really a calling? I very humbly believe that this is a vocation. This is a calling. The way that a monk gets a calling to live a monastic life, being a teacher is a deep calling. If you don't really feel that calling, you're probably not there yet. If you feel like you want to be there, again, why do you want to be there? What do you think is going to happen when you're there? Because if it's driven by the short term, I feel like ego is a word that we throw around a lot, but the ego is beautiful, right? Again, without my ego, I can't be in the world and function. The focused ego is what is beautiful and powerful. If you're practicing and you're still counting repetitions, trying to imitate something that's outside of you, copying something, then you're not ready to teach. You need to start teaching if you're in the teacher training, even if you're still there, to get it under your belt, but it hasn't become you yet. I feel very strongly about the integrity of having the experience of sharing from your experience. And I think that you said something earlier where maybe teachers overlook something. I forget exactly what you said, but I feel like it's not so much that they're forgetting or overlooking it. I think it's that we just don't know what we don't know. We haven't experienced what we haven't experienced yet. So, some tips and tools that are very powerful are keeping a journal, doing things that are introspective, doing things that are not just moving your body. And in Pilates, like the same thing happens with yoga. Joseph Pilates talked about a lot of other things other than just physical exercise, the dry brush, mental hygiene, sunshine. So, remembering that whether it's Pilates or any other movement modality, it's about restoring this precious human experience. And it's very varied. And again, within that diversity, there are things that are universal, like sunlight. We need to be in the sun. We need to expose our eyes to the sun when we wake up in the morning. We need to drink water, right? We need minerals. We can observe our thoughts, observe how they make us feel. When a thought doesn't feel good, then reach for a better feeling thought. And so if you're practicing all of these things a lot and you're using the movement as another environment and an opportunity to truly know yourself, you don't even have to do anything. It's just going to ooze out of you. But if you're practicing and you're feeling inadequate because, so many times I hear, I don't look like the picture. I'm like, just burn the book. Let go of that external image. What do you feel? Where are you in space? And when that becomes our focus, feeling versus thinking, this beautiful series of books, Conversations with God, he talks about the fact that we're human beings. We're not human doings. And our life and society and the world has educated us to value humanity and individuals based on what they do, right? Rather than how they be, to just play with the language, right? How are we feeling? How are we showing up? And it's a very cyclical thing. So I think you need to have lots of tools outside of just the repertoire.
It's so interesting that you say that, Christy. So it's not like, it's not like a quick fix. You do X, Y, and Z and you turn up and you're present. It's that you're living this life in an authentic way as best you can. I often think that like we are trying to help our clients with more balance in their lives and, feeling good about themselves. And I guess our journey will help shape their journey. And that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? That we have to take responsibility for ourselves and look after our own well-being so that we can turn up and be present and have practiced that in other places, isn't it? I'm guessing that's what you're saying. In a simple way, it's if you're struggling to get out of your head and have lots of thoughts while you're teaching class, you need to practice getting out of your head elsewhere so it becomes an easier thing to tap into. For me personally, I mean, my studio, Christy, is called Soul Pilates because as you said, when I discovered this and I started to feel myself and know myself, it's like I discovered my soul. I realized who I was. I also feel incredibly called by this work. This podcast was a message that kept coming to me. And people are like, why are you doing this? It's like, I don't know. I just think I'm supposed to do this. So off we go. And so many things have happened to me like that. But for me, and I want to share this with our listeners, when you get what you're talking about, my husband says he's never met anyone who can turn up. I can turn up to a class sometimes frazzled, lots going on. I'm running a business, there's lots going on. But I have really honed the ability when I step through the door, it's like my brain goes quiet and I'm there. And at the end of teaching 1, 2, 3 hours, I come out energized actually because I have, in a way, been mindful and meditated in a way, even though I'm teaching these people and I'm inspiring them from something from my soul that I'm so passionate about. And I guess that's the payoff, isn't it? Because teachers get burnt out. And I guess part of the challenge of them getting burnt out is their mind being so busy in a class and them wondering, how do I manage these people who are different levels? And this person over there can't do flexion, and this person's just walked in and they're pregnant, and I didn't know that. My plan's gone out the window now, and what do I do? That's a lot to fit in, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, being authentic is allowing yourself to feel the frazzle, to be there, to have that moment of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person showed up to this class. I wasn't prepared for that. I think burnout is a gift. I'm sure. And I would want to ask you, Nick, before it sounded like I imagine you walking through your door and it's like you've stepped into a portal and it's like you've rehearsed this, right? So many times. But did you experience burnout in your career before having a studio, before having the ability to walk in?
Absolutely. And come to the edge of it many times. But I am with you. And I loved what you said earlier about, you said it about Joseph Pilates, but taking ownership of your triggers, of your trauma. I get a little frustrated sometimes with people. But I've had a lot of stuff go on in my life and I've taken responsibility and I've learned, and I'm so grateful for all the crappy things that happened actually, because it's forced me to have to figure this out. And I am passionate about the skills that we have to figure it out and to thrive from difficult situations. Doesn't make them, of course, we wouldn't wish them on somebody. But sometimes people can almost, they identify with their traumas and their triggers, and they sort of get quite stuck there, and everyone else around them is supposed to be understanding of that. And I feel like you don't get well then. Like, I think you get well by being able to face them, I guess, which I'm not saying is easy. And I feel I've been lucky to have people who've supported me with working through this. It's how I discovered energetic medicine along the line. Actually, my therapist did a lot of energetic and spiritual work. And a bit like you, I was like, oh, now I was opened up to a different world. But everything is a growth opportunity if you want it to be, I guess.
It's a choice, right? I think Joseph Campbell said it. Our greatest power is our power to choose. And even the word presence, before, and sent has to do with sentient, with being alive, with being conscious. So much of it is about what we practice, what becomes habitual. I love what you're saying, that challenge of like, I'm doing all this work, I'm taking responsibility. Now I have to tiptoe around those of you that don't accept the challenge, that don't want to do the work. And I feel that the word, the image that comes to my mind there is boundary, is where you can have an energetic boundary, a very physical, very clear boundary. Because here's the thing, right? Is that presence is about honoring where the other is, or where the others are, if it's a group or whatever, right? So when I'm fully present in myself in the moment, I'm able to allow whatever is occurring around me to simply be. I don't need it to be different in order for me to find my rooted, clear center and knowing of who I am. So when I'm triggered, it's because I'm having a moment where my boundary has got some pores in it, right? There's an energetic leak, energy seeping out, energy is seeping in. And so now I'm getting pulled. And this is part of life, right? Life is a sacred dance. We're constantly, I call it the electromagnetic soup, right? I show up to teach a class, I show up to do the retreat, wherever I'm showing up, I show up to school because I also teach children. I teach academics, I teach math and science and and language. These are all different electromagnetic soups, whether you're 7 years old or you're 70 years old and you're going through whatever it is that you're going through. On the days that I feel more centered, more present, I really enjoy everything a lot more. And that doesn't mean that it goes a certain way. What it means is that I'm able to soften back into myself over and over and over again until it becomes a state of being. So it's about habitual practice of your mindset. But here's the thing. So this has like been blowing my mind the last few I guess years at this point, but in the last year I took a deeper dive with the Heart Math Institute. It turns out that there's a little brain in the heart. This is what scientists are calling it. And so there's an emerging field of science called neurocardiology. And what I've been learning is that it has an independent neural system, our heart does. And there's basically a highway. There's a lot of highways in the body or pathways, right? But there's a specific one between the brain in our head and the brain in our heart. And it turns out that the little brain in the heart emits more information to the brain in the mind than the mind to the heart. So, this is an invitation for all of us to put this Cartesian model on its head, flip it 180, and we're evolving from I think, therefore I am. What is more true is I feel, therefore I am. And so, if I can find more and more opportunities to allow myself to just drop in and say, how do you feel? And, I'm very blessed to have made the choices that I've made, to do the work, as you're saying. I also have had a life with certain challenge. I look around, I live in Central America, and I realize the point of privilege that we experience for so many simple things that I'd never even realized until I moved out of, my more comfortable life, and realizing that I'm surrounded by individuals that will ask me, "So how do you feel?" And I say, "Good." And they say, "Well, that's not a feeling. That's an adjective." And then going, "Okay, yeah. How do I feel? What do I feel? How do I know that that's what I feel? What's giving me that feedback right now? What is that point of feedback? What am I in dialogue with right now?" And getting to know yourself more and more. And that's why, again, very on a very practical aspect, building in time in the everyday where you can pull away from the noise, like the bathroom is a super sacred space. I feel like there's a book cooking up in me. I've got a funny, someone gifted me a book, and it's things to do while you're on the loo.
I've got that book in my loom.
It's so good. I'm feeling inspired to have a more metaphysical, esoteric things to do, or ways to guide their prompts, ways to guide your awareness while you're in the loo. Because if you're a mom, whatever your life is, the bathroom is such a sacred space. And we have that gift throughout the day to go alone and close ourselves up in the bathroom. But now how are we how are we showing up in that sacred, we can turn it into a sacred space, right? Because if we're in there and we're thinking, "Oh, I've got to write back to Nick. I've got to do this. Oh my God, I've got to hurry up. I've got to hurry up and pee or else I'm going to be late." It's like they can wait.
I'm interested in all that we've talked about around how we as teachers can think about presence and the practice that needs to go into that. And it's reminding me of what I think Pilates taught in this way first did for me, where we get to do that for our clients. And I'm interested to hear the kind of language that you use in your classes and in your cueing, yes, around exercises, but maybe also around how people can notice themselves, how they can tune in, because we're in this world and we are hopefully as teachers making a commitment to expanding ourselves in lots of different ways. And hearing your words today, people might think, yes, I need to maybe have a journaling practice and a meditative practice. And yes, because this is going to be part of my job and is going to allow me to turn up and be present. But for the everyday client, I often think that Pilates it's interesting you talked about yoga because when I first opened my studio, it was like there were many clients who felt that yoga was just too woo-woo for them, but Pilates was just science. And so it was, a bit safer. And I always think that's true, but we get to sprinkle in the magic and we get to do it through the words that we use. And I wondered, do you agree with that? Do you agree that we get to give our clients opportunities to notice themselves and to feel in a way maybe that life doesn't, open them up to?
I mean, I would dare say if people aren't noticing themselves, it's not Pilates. So, again, really looking at Pilates as a philosophy and not as a cluster of exercises, because you can approach things as a robot and just kind of do it and count and repeat and go on and eat dinner with your family as a robot and eat and continue and repeat and go on. And you're not really experiencing your humanity. So, again, if we look at what Joseph Pilates wrote about, he wrote about observing yourself and taking responsibility for yourself, for all of the varied things that yourself means and has to do in a day. The movement is just a metaphor. Everything is a metaphor. So honestly, yoga is incredibly scientific. Ayurvedic medicine hasn't changed in thousands of years, like Chinese medicine. That's how scientific it is. So it's what does scientific even mean? There's been a method of hypothesis, observation, experimentation, conclusion, and then hypothesis, right? And so this science is a method, is a practice of testing a belief in an idea. So data is not science. Data is the result of applying the scientific method. So I think that that's a super important distinction. And so how do we do it? We do it by, as a teacher, we do it by being in a very deep state of curiosity of what if I ask them to turn their foot out? What if I change the spring? What if X, Y, and Z? Apply the scientific method when you're teaching safely, right? It's a journey. If you're a newer teacher, then you are always going to lean more towards safety. And something that I actually just shared a couple of days ago with a cohort of students, how do you know what's right? How do you know what's safe? And I just, something that's very practical to do is to first ask people about themselves. And I remember having experiences where someone would show up at the studio and share that they had been diagnosed with a condition that I couldn't even pronounce and I had never heard of before. And I didn't have, this is again before Chat GPT, before Google. I didn't have time or tools to be like, oh, hold on a second, right? Even if you did, if someone walked into your studio and that occurs, you're not going to say, oh, hold on, let me look that up, right? But something you can do is say, well, tell me about how you spend your day. Tell me about what do you do? How do you spend your day? I don't need to know what they do for a living. I don't know about in the UK, but in the United States, there's has been, it's like all this emphasis on what you do for a living defines who you are as a person. So because I know that, I don't want to go there and potentially trigger or just take the relationship there because I really could care less how they make their money. I want to know how many hours at a time are you in a seated position? What's the environment like? Is there a lot of stress? Do you have a lot of external pressure on you? Did you drive here? Are you comfortable getting on and off of the floor? So, if I can get some of this information about the movements that they are able to do throughout their day, then allow that. You have to let that inform the way that you design the class and the experience and your cueing. So if you know that we all sit, right? Do you sit at the table to eat? Do you have a toilet, a Western toilet? You know, we all sit, we all stand, relate things to what is relatable to them, right? So meet people where they are is the first very important thing, and be humble as the teacher. I think something too that I've learned not only from almost, I can't even believe it now. How many years have I been teaching?
I think you get past the point of counting. I'm there now.
30 years. What? Like, my brother is only a little older than that. How's that even possible? I'm not much older than my brother. Teaching movement, not Pilates, right? Because I started teaching aerobics, actually, dance aerobics, which I still love and do in the living room. But
Step
I
aerobics is having a real revival. Have
is
you
it?
noticed this? It's all over
No.
Instagram. There's this really cool guy in New York, and it is like hip hop on step aerobics, and I'm desperate to go. I
Oh
was
my
a
god,
step teacher. I was an aerobics teacher. That's how I got through college. I paid myself through college that way. And
same
I keep
here.
thinking it's having a moment. I'm going to bring it back.
Oh my god, please send me that on Instagram. I
I'll
would
send
love
you it.
to.
It's honestly now I keep getting it's on my algorithm every week. I'm like, this is the class to go to. It looks so cool. It's
Oh, I
like
love
hip
it.
hop dancing on a step. It's so brilliant. But Christy, in terms of like when you're teaching your classes, what do you feel about the language of cueing and where we bring in tactile cueing? Like, how do we create an experience for our clients that transcends, like you said, just exercises?
Super practical things. Use as little language as possible. So notice yourself if you're saying things like, now I'm going to have you, now I want you to, we're going to, just tell them what's next. So something that my first real like teacher, guru, Nishit Patel, based in New York City, something that he would share with us so often were the moments when we would be guiding a movement or a sequence of movements, the moments where their minds just had the opportunity to escape. So you really are creating the intention of creating a container and experience where their minds are staying in the present moment, in what's going on. Least amount of words possible. Silence. Get comfortable with allowing there to be spaces of silence. If you've asked them to notice something, be quiet so that they can notice. Another thing, let them have enough repetition. Obviously, if you're teaching a super high level and they already know the movements and we're doing more of like a, Romana choreography on the reformer, that's different. Then you already got a seasoned mover that can go, that knows where they are in space. If you're guiding more of the, everyday kind of population, the sedentary population, people that work at a desk at a computer for 8 hours a day, give them enough time to figure it out for themselves. Let go of the need to correct. The students don't come to class to get it right. And I feel like so often teachers, and I'm not saying, I want to be very clear, my experience of observing teachers in the last 5 years has been through the lens of a teacher trainer, right? Working with people that are in a teacher training environment. I also used to manage instructors, groups of instructors, and so then there's a different lens there, right? So I'm very much speaking to the people that are in a teacher training class, and this might also apply to people that are already graduate and already teaching. Let go of the need to correct. Notice if you're showing up to teach and look for what is not going well. Instead, play with walking in, making some suggestions, guiding the body position, get the movement going, and now just be quiet and observe and notice if 5 or 6 or a few repetitions of something, if the nervous system starts to clean it up on itself. It's kind of magical that as you just bring awareness to certain things, the awareness in and of itself is going to bring the balance, because the nervous system is wired to find center, to be balanced, to repair, to heal. So when you can learn to be quiet long enough, let a movement just kind of go, let go of the need. I think something that instructors get tripped up on a lot is thinking that their students are bored. No, we get bored. The instructor gets bored. The students are in their zone having their experience. Observe them and then play with cueing what you notice. And it might be that you notice someone's shoulders are way up by their ears. Again, under the umbrella of safety. What if you cue everyone to glide their shoulders way up to their ears? Now glide their shoulders down from the ears. Now notice if you do that while you're doing this other thing, does it feel different? So I'm not implying that what they did was wrong, that they need to be better, that they're not enough, because even though it might not be our intention to imply those things, when we're constantly correcting, that's the message. That's a takeaway, and that's something that again, maybe we could say that we've all received an education of not being enough. So if you can let go of correcting, give people more time, cue what you notice occurring in the room, get comfortable with the silence, and use the least amount of words possible. And breathe.
And breathe. And I think it's interesting. I had this conversation with one of the comprehensive students the other day. I think when you do something like a comprehensive training and you get to really understand what these exercises are about and what we're trying to get the body to do, people can get a little bit then like hooked onto, I want everyone to be able to do it to this level of perfection. I love what you're sharing that actually provides some ideas and let it land for someone themselves, like, let them figure it out is such a powerful, powerful way. Christy, I could literally talk to you all day. I'd love to know, what do you do in your practice to help you stay grounded and present? Like, what are your kind of well-being practices that you have in your life?
I have so many. I have a lot. I really live more and more the older I get. I live more and more very much in service to my community, to the earth, to humanity. I try and quiet my mind. I use card decks, so oracle decks. I pay attention to my dreams. Cacao has been a huge medicine grounding force for me in the last 5 years. I've have a very deep relationship with cacao. I've obviously organized my life in a way where I live, at least I try to. It's a very dynamic place, but we really prioritize having space, at least on a weekly, with my husband to just drop in with each other, with my neighbors, with people whose children my children are growing up with. So really surrounding myself with other individuals that are also committed to a life of presence. Human design has been an incredible, powerful tool lately. Paying attention to the cycles of the moon, paying attention to the cycles of the day, of my own energy, really realizing, I think once I became a mother, I realized that my energy and my time were my greatest currency. And getting very clear on what my priorities are and allowing my priorities to inform my values and therefore my choices. And living a life that makes sense to myself allows me to honor everyone else a bit more. As you said, it doesn't mean it's easy. It's actually really ugly sometimes. This last month has been incredibly challenging for a number of reasons. And remembering that it's a dance and knowing yourself enough to know what you need to move your energy. So when you notice you're in a funk, quickly snap out of it. Don't stay there, because it's not about, we're going to fall into the funk. We're going to fall into criticism and judgment. We joke around sometimes where you're just having a day where it's like, I just lovingly hate everyone equally. And you're just like, the world is too much. I'm done. Stop the world. I'm ready to get off. How long do you stay there though? So, like, I'll turn on music. I'll let myself go there. You have to let yourself go there, feel it, and then dance with it. Don't turn it into a roommate.
That's such an important point, and it's so true because it's not, and it's thank you for sharing that, because even though you do a lot of self-care and work on yourself and in your community and trying to be aligned, it's nice for you to share that you also have difficult times. I think people sometimes think that, we're all in this like wellness bubble, and like, no, that's not true at all. I had a terrible morning. I woke You just were making me laugh because I woke up in such a funk. I looked at this report. This report was terrible for the business. And I was like, oh, and then I got myself really in my head, and exactly what you said. And I thought, I need to shift this out of myself. And I haven't got a lot of time. I went and did a 10-minute sound bath meditation. And do you know what? It really started to turn the tide. And then I had this lovely phone call with someone. I got off the phone and I was like, do you know what? I could look at that report so much differently now. That's your point, isn't it? Like, it's just, I love that. Yeah. Don't let it be your friend. To end our podcast, Christy, we always ask a few quick or quickish fire questions. So, what is your favorite Pilates exercise and why?
All right, going back to self-care, since we were just talking about that, one of my favorite self-care Pilates exercises is book opening because it really moves the energy around the heart. And I love being able to feel my breath kind of move the movement and my breath really massaging all the different aspects of my heart. And what I do is I clean all my heart crevices when I'm doing book opening. So if I'm worried about the past, I focus on the back. If I'm anxious about things that haven't happened, I focus on the front.
I love that. If you had one word to say how you wanted your clients to feel,
Satisfied.
who's been a mentor or a teacher that's helped shape your life so far?
Oh my God, there's so many. Definitely, obviously, Brent Anderson, Shelley Power. I feel like I've got them in my pockets all the time. I also get to work so closely with them. Alexander Bolander, Nishit Patel, who's in New York, who's a yogi. He's a disciple of Swami Rama. Joseph Pilates. A lot. Some of them are dead. Yeah, Dostoevsky, Russian philosophy. Uh, I mean, there's just
Well,
so
you're going to
many.
have so many because, of the studying that you do as well. Like, I imagine all of these have made the tapestry that is Christi Idavoy. Is there one thing that you wish that every Pilates teacher knows?
I wish for every Pilates teacher to know that there is space and beauty for and in all of us. I really would pray for a very loving Pilates family around the world.
Amen to that. Christy, this has been such a fabulous chat. Thank you so much for sharing. How can people work with you? I know you have your retreats. I keep thinking I need to go to Costa Rica and go on one of these retreats. Tell me about your retreats and tell me about how people can work with you if they want to, go deeper into this work that you've shared today.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, I have a website, which I'm very much planning in the new year to give it more love and energy. This year has not been centered around my website at all, but it's christiidavoy.com. I have a retreat called Earth Spirit Retreat. It's 4 nights here in Costa Rica, and I've actually been asked to expand it and include some extra stuff for Pilates teachers, yoga teachers. So that would happen maybe before or after the retreat. I'm still playing with that. The next one is in May. I honestly forget the exact dates. I think it's around May 22nd. And that will all be up on my website very soon. And it is a transformational retreat. And I'm always blown away with the testimonies that I get where people's lives and paths and careers have completely shifted after coming on this retreat. And it's very much about restoring our experience of unity. It's very, very much centered around unity consciousness, Christ consciousness, Krishna consciousness, all of the religions really point towards this one universal truth of brotherhood, sisterhood, right? Of love your neighbor the way you love yourself, really through our connection to the elements and the earth. So it's a container that invites everyone into a space of remembrance. And there's lots of freedom. Everything is optional. There's a schedule, and everything is subject to change because we go off of the energy of the group. Every group brings its own, and it's like another interesting thing about the heart is that the heart knows what happens before, like our hearts agreed to be here and do this before we actually arrived to do this. So I have a one-on-one meeting with every individual before the retreat. And I kind of work with the energy of every individual before we show up together in person. So knock on wood, I've been doing them since 2018, and every group has been really a gift and honestly a miracle. It really feels like these ordinary everyday miracles.
Well, I know people who've been on these retreats and you're not exaggerating. People do tell me life-changing sort of awarenesses that came up for them, where they should be, what they're about, who they are. So, yeah, I need to get my ass to Costa Rica at some point
You're
for sure.
welcome. I'd love to have
Thank
you.
you so much for today. It has been so wonderful to delve into these subjects, and I really appreciate you kind of going so deep with them. So, thank you, Christi.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening, and a huge thank you again to Christi Idavoy for sharing her time, her wisdom, and her heart with us. Every week, this podcast continues to grow beyond anything that I ever imagined, and it's all because of you for listening, for sharing, and being part of this amazing Beyond the Reformer community. If you've loved today's episode, please make sure that you follow Beyond the Reformer wherever you listen, on your social medias. Could you leave us a quick review, maybe share it with another teacher? You spreading the word is how this podcast continues to keep growing. Until next time, keep moving, keep teaching, and keep staying curious. I will see you next week.